Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I've got something a little bit different. It's baseball cards. I was recently at a flea market, just a little tiny town flea market that only had a few vendors. Really didn't find anything, didn't have any comics. However, I was at one table, and the guy there had this little thing of old baseball cards. Now, it was $3, and I could see from the front card that it was old Red Sox cards from the 60s. So, $3. Or, I mean, the top card was Red Sox, but I live in Massachusetts, so my guess was that they were probably all Red Sox. So, for $3, had to buy the little mystery box of baseball cards. So, I'm going to show those to you. But that also inspired me to dig through my stuff and dig out and find my old baseball card collection. Now, when I was growing up, my brother was a lot more into baseball cards than I was initially. My earliest memories are of him, in terms of baseball cards, are of him getting some kind of collection from one of the neighbor kids or something. This would have been around 1980 or 79, because the cards that he got in that like little mini collection, in my memory, there were cards from like 76, 77, 78, maybe 79. Um, and so my brother got into baseball cards, but of course I didn't really. As a little kid, we were all about the Red Sox and stuff, but my favorite player was Carlton Fisk, and when he left the team at the end of 1980, I kind of didn't really pay much attention to sports in general, but Red Sox in particular, until probably 86 when I was a little bit older. But in 1987, this sort of baseball card boom started happening, where suddenly everybody was collecting baseball cards. Don't know exactly what triggered that, but for some reason there was just this huge like fad of people collecting baseball cards. 87, 88, 89, 90, and those years, like, it seemed like everybody I knew in school at the time was really into baseball cards. Now, we also had this guy. I went to a private church school, and Ernie was the name of our youth pastor. And Ernie was really big into baseball cards. He had collected cards in the 60s and early 70s when he was a kid. And so he was really into baseball cards. And so he also influenced all of us kids at the school to sort of get into baseball cards. So, like, everybody at the school was hardcore collecting baseball cards. And so around 88, 788, really 88, really started getting into collecting baseball cards. And then, of course, that wave sort of crashed in the early 90s, which we've seen so many times in different collectible markets where everybody saw the money that could be made with baseball cards. And so all these new printers started making sets of baseball cards, and the companies that were already doing it started putting out multiple sets of baseball cards. And then there was so many people buying them that the sets were all super overprinted, so there were billions of cards, and so none of them were worth anything, and it just became too much, and everything crashed, right? And that's when I stopped buying baseball cards. Was early mid 90s, like 93, 94. And I was just getting into other stuff, Magic the Gathering. You've seen some of my recent videos about that. But I do still have some of my baseball cards. Now, at some point, I got rid of all of the random cards, but my focus was always collecting the Red Sox, and in particular, collecting the cards for the Red Sox players from when I was a kid. So that was the Red Sox had some great teams in the 70s, even though we never won anything. Uh, some really great teams with great players, a lot of Hall of Fame players, and those are the kids. Like as a kid, those were like my heroes, particularly Carlton Fisk, but also Jim Rice and Carl Yastrzemski, Fred Lynn and Dwight Evans, Louis Tiant. Like those were the players from when I was a little kid. So I had to focus on collecting the older cards, just like with the comic books, where yes, I bought and read all the new stuff, but my real interest in collecting was always the old stuff, Bronze Age in particular. Same thing with the baseball cards. I was really into cards from the 70s and 60s and 50s. So I dug those out. When I sold off all my other cards, I kept all my Red Sox cards and I've dug them out. So we're going to take a look at that and see what we got here. But first, let's crack open this box. I'll just show you what I got here for $3. There's some cool cards here. Baseball card fan, nothing valuable, but baseball card fans and particularly Red Sox old heads will appreciate this. Now, these are all beat up, but that's fine. Just like with comics, I don't care about really condition that much with baseball cards, maybe even less with baseball cards. I know that a lot of card collectors are super anal about the condition, the sharpness of the corners, but also things like centering on the cards is much more important than that sort of thing in comics. But I don't care. So what we've got here is we're starting in 1967. These are 67. These are tops. Now, when I was collecting, there were all these different companies in the 80s putting out cards. Donruss, Flea, and then eventually Score, and a bunch of others jumped in, and that's kind of when I stopped. But I decided very early on in my collecting that I was going to focus entirely on tops because they were the company with the long legacy. They were the only company I really cared about. So here's Dave Moorhead. Now these 67 cards, of course, have a special interest for Red Sox fans because the 1967 team was one of the great Red Sox teams that didn't win. They went to the World Series and they lost in 7 games to the St. Louis Cardinals. Of course, all the Red Sox World Series losses were all in Game 7. So came so close. But 67 is the impossible dream year. So the team had been really bad for a bunch of years in a row. And so everyone assumed they were going to be terrible again in 67. And then out of nowhere, they almost won the World Series behind Carl Yastrzemski's Triple Crown. And here's Jose Santiago. So these are the cards from 67 that I got. Now, we've got some bigger name Red Sox stars here in the 68 set. Here's a 68 Jim Lonborg. Now, I do have some other, when we get to my collection, you'll see that I have some signed Jim Lonborg cards here. But here's the 68 card. Here's Rico Petrocelli, another like key long-term Red Sox key player, who's one of the bridge players from the 60s into the 70s teams. Dick Ellsworth. And we've got Dan Osinski. So we've got 4 cards from the 68 set. And these all have like damage on the back. You see they've got like a little patch there. I would bet anything that the guy who owned these as a kid had put glued or taped this to something in some kind of notebook or on a wall or something like that. 69. Now here's a big star. You're gonna see more of these cards from Tony Conigliaro. Of course, that's one of the big what ifs of that 67 season and Tony C's career in general. So he was one of the big stars in the game and one of the big upcoming like young stars. Just like one of the top, for those who don't know Tony C, he's a big figure, at least he was when I was growing up here in Massachusetts and New England among Red Sox fans, because he's kind of the big what if. You know, by the time he was like 24 years old, he had like 125 home runs, like just an amazing talent. And then partway through this 1967 season, before they got to the World Series, he was hit in the face with a fastball and shattered his cheekbone and basically broke his skull. He missed the entire 1968 season before coming back here in 1969. And he was never the same player since after that. He continued to play for the Red Sox for a few more years, but he never really recovered from that injury. Here's more from 69. Russ Gibson. Now, the Red Sox went to the World Series again in 67 and then in 75, but they had some really good teams here in the early 70s as well that almost made it. Now, this was a time when only the pennant winners would get to the playoffs. There were no divisions, it was still just the American League and the National Leagues, and there was no playoffs. It was just the World Series. So there's a lot of Red Sox teams here, a lot of second place finishes, um, stuff like that. Juan Pizarro, 1969, and then kind of randomly, there's also this 1977 Tom Murphy card. So that's what I got in my box for $3. Yes, they're all low grade, but for $3, you can't beat this. We got 3 cards from the '67 Red Sox, 4 cards from the '68 Red Sox, and 3 cards from the '69 Red Sox. So that's pretty exciting as far as I'm concerned. At some point, once this video is over, I'm going to file these away with the respective years, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you in my binder. Now, a lot of my newer sets I don't have in binders, they're just in a box. So basically all the sets that were like from 1977 up to the early 90s are in a box. But I've got here in the folder the sets before that. So I don't have any complete teams before that. I think the earliest complete year I have is probably like 82. But I have what I was able to put together as a kid from the previous years. So we're going to start in '76, and then I'll go back through the years. The big focus was on the stars, my favorite players at the time. So I did put together like a full set of all the Red Sox Carlton Fisk cards, which unfortunately wasn't that many because of the debacle where they let him leave the team in 1980. But all the Carlton Fists, I got all the complete set of all the Jim Rice cards, and then I've got most of the Dwight Evans cards and most of the Carl Yastrzemski cards. Carl Yastrzemski was a player who was really big when I was a kid. Is my brother's favorite player, and I almost put together a set of all the Carl Yastrzemski cards, but I'm missing a couple here and there, and I didn't get the first two, 61 and 60. So I don't have those, but I do have a lot of the other Carl Yastrzemski cards. So let's take a look in the binder, starting with 1976. All right, here we go. The 1976 Red Sox. The lighting's a little weird in here, but this is the best I could do because everything else is just too much of a glare on the pages. Bernie Carbo, player that was, key member of the teams back when I was a kid. A lot of these players are players that I can kind of barely remember. I was only 3 years old in 1976. Rick Miller, another starter for the team. Bob Montgomery, he was the backup catcher, but then he later on was the color man, the color analyst for Red Sox broadcasts. So, of course, everybody knows him. There's Dick Pole, an unfortunate name. What are you going to do, though? When I was a kid growing up, we had a birdhouse in our backyard that was on a really tall pole. It was like, there's this pole that was like 15 feet tall that just had a birdhouse at the top, and we called it that Dick Pole. And there's the Jim Rice 1976. And you see it says All-Star Rookie. Of course, he has a rookie card from '75. Which you'll be able to actually see because it's on the next page. You can see through here. There's the '76 Louis Tiant card. The great Louis Tiant. All right, and here's the 1976 Carl Yastrzemski cards. And here's the American League Championship card with the Red Sox beating the A's. All right, so here's what I have for '75. I say that somewhere I've got a Carlton Fisk from this year, but there's a few cards that I couldn't find. There's a few cards I couldn't find when I was going through my stuff. I had taken some of these cards out for one reason or another, and I don't see the '75 Fisk. So, but here we have Dwight Evans. There's Dick Pole again. Diego Segui. There's Yaz, and there's the Jim Rice rookie. Again, another huge what if in 1975. Of course, the Red Sox lost the World Series in dramatic fashion. That's the famous. In Game 6, they won on the walk-off home run where Carlton Fisk hit the light pole, hit the foul pole with the home run in the 12th inning. But people forget that in the next game, the Red Sox lost the game in the it was either the bottom of the eighth or the bottom of the ninth, where I forget exactly. I think it might have even been the ninth inning where the Reds scored to win that one. But Jim Rice was the big breakout star that year, and Fred Lynn. They were both rookies, the Gold Dust Twins, they called them, and they're just transformative for the team. And Jim Rice, superstar. He later, won the home run title just a couple years later, but he got hit by a pitch, broke his hand right at the end of the year, and missed the playoffs completely. So who knows what would have happened if Jim Rice had been able to play in the World Series that year. Just another unfortunate happenstance. Here's the 1975 Red Sox team card. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention is the design. 75 to me is probably my favorite design. This is like one of the all-time classic Topps baseball card designs is the 75 set. It's just so awesome. You're going to see a couple great sets here. Everyone has their own opinions. It's just that mine are correct. And so we'll show you the ones that I think are the best. Here's the 74 set. More names that I recognize. Luis Aparicio. There's Dwight Evans. The Red Sox in the 70s, the mid-late 70s had just like the best outfield. And they were all young stars. Dwight Evans in right, Fred Lynn in center, and Jim Rice in left. Like three top stars, and all young, all in their 20s, and just it's crazy that we didn't end up winning anything. And then here's Carlton Fisk, another Hall of Famer behind the plate. There's a 74 card here. There's Rick Miller again. You can see this Rico Petrocelli is signed. Some of these guys I met at different conventions and whatever. Others, other weird events. There's a 74 Louis Tiant, all-time great player. So you can see how badly miscut this Rick Wise card is. It's interesting, like getting back into Magic the Gathering. There's people that collect these miscuts. If you have a Magic card that's cut like this, it has a significant premium. Whereas if you have a baseball card that's miscut like that, it's worth a lot less. So I find those sort of things interesting. And there's Yaz. There's the 74 Yaz. 74 team. And there's really beat up, but the all-star catchers, there's Carlton Fisk and Johnny Bench, of course, who would square off the next year in the World Series. All right, here's 73. I kind of like this design, but it's overshadowed by some of the others from the 70s. We're getting to the point, this is the year I was born, so I don't really remember a lot of the players. Speaking of miscut cards, I never cared about condition, and I didn't have much money to spend on baseball cards when I was a kid, so I was getting cards that were miscut and low grade. That's how I was able to put the collection together. And then here is the Dwight Evans rookie card. So this is 73. There's the Dwight Evans rookie. It's also got Al Bumbry's rookie on the same card. And then ignore that. That's on the next page. But I only have a few cards from 72. Although I do have a couple of the important ones. Specifically, There's Yaz. There's the 72 Yaz. And then here's Yaz in action. There's the 72 team card. And then here's the big one. This is probably the most valuable card that I own because I don't really have anything worth a lot. And it's not in very good condition. But here is the Carlton Fisk rookie. Also Cecil Cooper's rookie. Here's 71. It's a cool design with the black. I like the black. It really pops out. But you know what? Let's go back. This is one of my favorite designs. It's interesting. I'm not sure exactly what was going on in 72, but it feels like the early 70s. And I don't know if it's because of this is a discussion we don't need to have, but I don't know if it was like the socio-political environment, what was everything going on with the country, but it feels like the early 70s, like 72, 73, that area, were sort of the birth of nostalgia because there was a big wave of design nostalgia, at least for stuff from the 1920s. So this is the 72 top set, but like the movie The Sting came out in 73 that has this very similar aesthetic, and there's a lot of stuff from this time period that has this look, right? This is also, though, the same time, 73 is when American Graffiti came out and really kicked off a big nostalgia for the 1950s. And so we've got like a lot of nostalgia looking back at different times here. And when you look back at history or pop culture history, that's really the first time that I can see, again, I wasn't alive, but a clear sort of wave of nostalgia for previous times. All right, so let's get back to 71. I don't have as much to say about these, except one of these years, and I don't know if it was 71, but it was around there. This was one of these near miss years. And if I'm remembering the story, it's one of the real sort of injustices where the Red Sox, and I might have this story wrong. I'm going purely off of memory with all of this. But the Red Sox had a game rained out that they never replayed, and the Sox ended up losing the pennant by a half game. That's impossible for me to even understand how that was allowed to happen. You know, imagine the uproar today if a team was eliminated from the playoffs because there was a game canceled and the league didn't allow them to replay it. That's ridiculous. But again, I'm just going off of memory. I might have that wrong. But I think that happened in 70 or 71. I love the team cards. There's a part of me that wants to just go and get all of the team cards that I'm missing and just have some pages here. I'll have to get some horizontal sleeves, but some pages that are just team cards. So here's the 1970 set. Oh, and look here. It's Bill Lee. That's got to be, if not his rookie card, one of his very first cards. Bill the Spaceman Lee, one of the real characters, and a beloved figure of the Red Sox, who was the victim of, again, the Red Sox and the Yankees in the 70s had a real violent rivalry, some on-field brawls. And I think it was in maybe 77 where they were, fighting for the pennant in 77 and 78. And Sox had a brawl, and Bill Lee got knocked to the ground, and Greg Nettles intentionally stomped on his pitching shoulder, and he was out for the rest of the year. Just absolute scumbags. There's Yaz, 1970. Oh, and here's Tony C. from 1970 as well. And we're starting to get into some years that I don't have that many cards. So here's 69. You can see there's supposed to be a card here. Like there's an empty spot here, which is why you can see the 68 card behind it. Again, I'm missing a few cards here. I think that's a Billy Canigliaro, Tony's brother. I have some Billy Canigliaro cards that he signed when I met him in the 90s, and I can't seem to find any of them. But there's Ken the Hawk Harrelson. You can see that I'm missing the Yaz cards from a couple of these years, and I was sure that I had them, but I can't seem to find those either. So here's what I have for 68, and you can some of these years I have very, very few cards. But here's a couple, even though I don't have the 68 Yaz in here, I do have some cool bonus Yaz cards. This is a really cool, I like the way they made it look like a TV screen when they're talking about the World Series. And then here's Yaz's All-Star selection, of course. These commemorating, his 67 Triple Crown year. Here's just the handful of cards from 67 that I already had. There's Jim Lonborg signed. I like how the card had a reproduction of his signature, but there's his real signature. Here's the few cards I have from 66. Again, there's another signed Jim Lonborg from 66. 65. You're going to notice some cards here from 65 and 64 that have writing on them. There's a Rico Petrocelli rookie from 65. So the story behind these ones with the writing is I got these from Ernie, the guy I mentioned earlier, my youth pastor when I was in school, and these were cards that he had bought when he was a little kid. And so when a player was traded, he would cross out the name of their old team and write in the name of the new team. So these were all cards I got from him in trades. So 64, the other interesting thing about the 64 design that I want to mention is that it's essentially the same design as the 86, except for 86, instead of the white, they had black. But it's a very, very similar design from 64 to 86. And they do that a lot at Topps, or at least they used to. Here's some more 64s. There's the 64 Yaz. I don't know if they still do that, but they definitely used to do that, where they'd look back at an old design and then they'd kind of update it for the modern times. Here's the 64 batting leader. It's a 64 card, but from the 1963 batting leader with Yaz leading the league. And then here's the 63 Yaz, which has the exact same photograph as the 64. I really like the design from 63, by the way, where they have the inset picture like that. And it doesn't look like I have any 62s. Here's 61. And then I just have the one card from 1960. And then boom. So 1959, there's a couple things about this year. First of all, it's my favorite design outside of 75. So my top years are 75, 72, and 59. I love the circle. There's something about the circle with the bright colors and the all lowercase names. I just love this design. So it was one that I kind of focused on when I was collecting, even though, I basically don't know who any of these players are, except for a couple. The other thing that's interesting about 59, though, that makes it kind of a fun and easy thing to collect for Red Sox fans, is that Topps, I don't believe that Topps put out a Ted Williams card because he retired. So all of this older sets before 59, they all have a Ted Williams card, which makes it very expensive to put those sets together. And then the following year, 1960, is the Yaz rookie, and that makes the sets starting in 1960 expensive to put together because of the Yaz cards. But 1959 is the 1 year in between, and so there aren't any cards from the Red Sox set that are worth anything. So you can get all of these for just a few dollars each. There are no real keys. There's only one high number regular card. There's a couple high number like whatever team card sort of things. But for the individual players, there's only one high number, so you can put the whole set together pretty cheap. So between those two things, when I was going to shows back in the late 80s and early 90s, I would pick up these 59s whenever I would see them just because I loved the design so much. And as you can see, I have quite a few of them. The one that I wanted to really mention was Jackie Jensen here because he's kind of a forgotten figure, overshadowed, of course, by Ted Williams, and then Yaz. But Jackie Jensen won the AL MVP, I think, in '58, and he was an excellent player, obviously. So he put up a lot of big numbers with the Red Sox for a lot of years, but he's kind of got lost because he was overshadowed. But look at this, even more 59s. I have a lot of the 59 set. So there was 33 players in the set, which is a lot of players considering you can't have 33 players on the team. And I think I've got 23 of them. So I'm only missing about 10 regular cards here. There's the batter bafflers. So I'm missing the team card. There's another one here that's a high number card like the batter bafflers that's called like infield power. That's kind of more expensive. But in terms of the regular players, there's only one player that's a high number card. So yeah. Okay, and then here we go. 58. Now I don't know what the story is of 58, but I have quite a few of these as well. And a lot of these players, again, I don't really know too much about them. I mean, Haywood Sullivan, if I remember correctly, he went on to become the general manager of the Red Sox, I think, for a while, or something like that. I would have been able to tell you more about that 20 years ago, but my knowledge is rusty. And then you can see behind here, I do have some cards from the late 90s, and I don't remember. I think I must have been at a game, and I bought a set of the cards. Even this has a couple of them missing, but I'm pretty sure I was at a game in '97, and I bought a thing that was just a set of all the Red Sox cards. So it's just before Clemens left. It's got Nomar and Mike Greenwell together, which players that I don't think of as being from the same era, but actually they were right at the end. Troy O'Leary. So these are 90s figures. So it's cool to have these, but it doesn't have the nostalgia for me. Things like there's a move on. So that's pretty much it. That's my set of Red Sox cards that I put together when I was a kid, plus the ones that I just got now. I mean, digging these out, it does make me want to finish some of these sets. I'm only missing 5 or 6 Yaz cards to have the complete set. I didn't show any of the cards that I have after 76, but I do have a lot of cards from about from 77 up to about 93. And some of those I have complete team sets for in the 80s and in the early 90s. I don't think any of them are worth anything. The Wade Boggs card was rookie from '83 was worth a lot at the time, but I'm guessing it probably cost more in 1988 than it's worth now. And I'm not sure I still have it. I might have sold it back when it was worth a lot of money. But it does make me nostalgic for this. It makes me kind of want to dig out some of these things and finish some of these sets and get the couple cards I'm missing, get the rest of the Dwight Evans cards that I'm missing, or a couple of Carlton Fists that I can't seem to find anymore. And none of them are really, valuable. But it was a lot of fun and nostalgic for me to look through these. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you next time.